So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Rooks. I am here to talk to you about detecting modern threats at scale within AWS. So a little bit about myself. I am originally from the great state of Maryland. I've been in Raleigh, North Carolina now for 8 years. I've been with AWS for about 5 years. I work with AWS Enterprise Support. So my role is really to help our customers proactively improve the security of their cloud workloads before it becomes a security incident or event. So I like to talk about some of the tools and techniques that we can use to identify threats within the AWS cloud. Then we can also take a look at some of the great free resources we have out there that I wanted to share with you all that would help you in your own cloud security journey. But before we do that, wanted to start with a question. How many folks in here are responsible for monitoring the threats within your cloud workload? Got a few, okay. So anyone familiar, this is your first time hearing about cloud security or AWS cloud security threat detection? No? Okay, all right, we'll get going. So, if you've heard me talk or anyone from AWS talk, our favorite thing to talk about in any security discussion is the shared responsibility model. And I think it's really important to understand this because when you're building your security controls and you're thinking about where we need to identify and respond to threats with the environment, you need to first know, like, okay, what's my responsibility? What does AWS cover? What do I cover? So I came from the on-prem world. In the telecom space, and the traditional security model that we follow was we're responsible for everything, right, end to end, hardware through the data. Now, if you're doing like some colo, you might have agreements to where like the physical data centers are managed by the data center provider, but for the most part, you are responsible for pretty much everything. Within AWS, we talk about it as a shared responsibility. And the shared responsibility means that AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. The customer is responsible for the security in the cloud. So this is the kind of the most common way to look at that, where you would see like, okay, you have the physical infrastructure at the bottom, the compute, storage, the database, and networking that actually powers the services, along with the software that powers the services. And then there's a line that's usually if you're thinking about it from like our Elastic Compute or EC2 service, it's kind of where the hypervisor layer is. Everything above that, the actual operating system on the instance, any type of encryption, any type of hardening, patching, the customer is responsible for that. Network security within your VPC, you're responsible for that, but then also security monitoring of all of the data plane and control plane, that's for you to understand as well. So take a look at the cloud security landscape, aka why we're here. So there's a lot of different threats that organizations face. One is that the main thing is that cybercrime has really evolved, especially over the past 10 years. So this is kind of could be a controversial statement, but a lot of cyber criminals are business people. They're just evil ones. And so what does that mean? They're using professional development processes. There is shorter timeline from vulnerability discovery to weaponization, cybercrime as a service, and attacks assisted by artificial intelligence. As we all love these amazing generative AI tooling capabilities and how it allows us to automate things very quickly and let us build our own businesses more efficiently, the threat actors, they've realized the same thing. We're at a point now where there are AI-enabled threat actors going out and they're compromising systems very, very, very quickly. So it makes it that much more important to really understand how to spot these things before they turn into something really bad, right? There's also some internal threats that a lot of organizations face. Resource misconfiguration. So if anyone was downstairs at the previous CSA panel, we talked about this quite a bit. The configuration of your cloud resources, it's really easy to inadvertently leave something like an S3 bucket open, and that can cause a data leakage event. Just get it done development. So this is one of my favorite things. I'm saying that a little facetiously, is you have this really cool idea and you start work on a project and you say, hey, let me build a proof of concept for this, right? What tends to happen is somebody from the business side comes along and says, hey, this is really cool. We need to go ahead and start monetizing this as quickly as possible. And you're saying like, well, this was kind of a proof of concept, but hey, you know what? Let's go ahead, let's ship it, let's go. What ends up happening is that proof of concept that was, kind of just built like with not really a lot of security in mind, ends up becoming a production system and holds production data, and then bad things can happen there. No least privilege. Again, a lot of times scoping down policies to least privilege seems to be something that slows folks down, so they just tend not to do it, and that has major consequences. Security as the office of no. I admit I was a little bit guilty of this. So my first security role, I was an ISSO. And what that role means is that I generally would tell people no a lot. People would come in and say like, hey, we have this idea for this feature or this release, or we want to use this software, and I'll say no because reasons, right? Generally, it wasn't aligned with NIST 853 or whatever our current internal control catalog was. But what I found is that if security, especially now in the modern world, since years ago, it used to be that there was a built-in lag time because it took time to purchase resources and infrastructure, provision services, things of that nature, right? Whereas now with the cloud, anyone who has a cool idea, they can spin it up and work on it immediately. And if you keep telling them no, they're just going to find a way around you, and then you're not even aware of what's going on. So this is where, the term DevSecOps, I know a lot of folks consider it a buzzword, but it's really important to have kind of like that shift left mindset to partner with the DevOps teams and the security teams. Security as an enabler, I guess is what I'm saying, rather than a blocker. Threat modeling. This is another thing that I think that is really important to discuss. Does anyone currently have a threat modeling program within your organization? Okay, just 2 folks. All right, I wish everyone had it. It's really, really crucial. There's actually a really cool workshop. I will post this on LinkedIn called Threat Modeling for Builders. It's a free workshop that we have. And really, when you think about it, every threat actor has a method, an opportunity, and a motive, right? So the method being the skills and knowledge to pull off the attack, the opportunity, time and access to accomplish, and the motive is the reason why. And as we mentioned before, a lot of times that could be monetary. A lot of times it could be like activism or hacktivism, they could say, or it could be something like an advanced threat like a nation state. Depending on your industry, that might be the issue. Or it could be someone who just likes to wreak havoc. So when you're working on building your environments and assessing your environments, there are these 4 questions that the name escapes me who created these, but a really simple way to do this is when you're working on building a new concept or standing up a new system, whether it be a website or anything else, ask yourself these 4 questions. What are we working on? What can go wrong? That could be a lot. What will we do about it? And did we do a good job? And it's an iterative process, right? So an example of this is if you're building, let's say, a web application, and you're hosting it in the cloud, okay, I just stand everything up at one VPC. I put my web server, my application server, and the database all in the same network zone. I don't have it protected by a firewall or anything else, right? Okay, that's what we're working on. What could go wrong? Well, if there's no network protection, a threat actor could potentially compromise any one of those resources and exfiltrate data before we knew what happened. So you have to really kind of think about that. And there's actually, again, a whole workshop on how to do this. The way that I found most customers and most organizations have success with is kind of gamify it, where you split folks up into teams and each team has a persona. You have one persona who is the sample threat actor, you have one person who is the defender, one person is the security person, and one person is the business person, right? Because, of course, with all things in life, security controls cannot overstate, they can't be, the cost of the cure cannot be more than the impact of the illness, I guess is what I'm saying. So you need to make sure that your security controls that you implement align to your organization's business objectives. Any questions so far? Awesome. All right, I'll keep going. Okay, so detecting threats in AWS, what we came to talk about today. Here are some common indicators of events within the cloud. Some of these I think you've probably heard about, and some of these I think most folks haven't really considered. Logs and monitors. So we'll talk about CloudTrail a little bit. This is a really important service, probably the foundational security service, in my opinion. You also have things like VPC full logs, guard duty, which we'll talk about here quite a bit, and then there's a number of other threat detection services. Another thing to consider here is also not just the logging for the cloud infrastructure, which is the control plane, the logs for your resources, whether it be like Windows events, Linux syslogs, or any other type of application-specific logs. So really, really crucial to make sure that you have a system in place to collect these logs from all these disparate places, and also give you a place to search them and try to identify any type of nefarious activity. Billing activity. This is one that a lot of folks don't think about. So within AWS, it is every service, almost every service to a T is pretty much pay as you go, right? If you are wanting to provision a server or an EC2 instance, you click the button, you launch the instance, the meter starts to run. So one of the very typical things that threat actors will do, especially nowadays since cryptocurrency is really popular, is they'll say, hey, I compromise this workload. I don't want to destroy anything. I don't want to exfiltrate the information. I'm going to get some free CPU cycles out of this, right? So what they'll do is they will start spinning up some very large GPU class instances. They'll start mining for Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency for, a few weeks. And then what happens is, somebody gets a bill at your company at the end of the month and is like, wow, my AWS bill is typically $10,000 a month and now it's $100,000 a month. What in the world just happened? Well, one way that you can kind of counteract that is using tools like AWS budgets or billing alarms. We can set a threshold where it says, hey, I know that I am budgeting $10,000 a month on my cloud. If I get to 90% of that, I need to be notified about that, right? Because that could be an indicator that, well, one, I could just be, maybe spending too much, but it could be a security event going on. If it's the third of the month and you're already at 90% of your budget, something wrong is probably happening. Threat intelligence. So Guard Duty, WAF, Shield Advanced Network Firewall, these have their own built-in threat intel feeds with their own indicators of compromise that are updated constantly. And partner tools. We have an amazing partner ecosystem with a number of great tools. A lot of them are here today. You probably heard them talk. AWS Outreach. So if you, especially if you're an enterprise support customer or even a business support customer, you will have access to your account team, and either your account solutions architect or your account TAM could notify you if AWS detects an event. We have a trust and safety team that does monitoring of the AWS infrastructure as a whole, and if we detect that, let's say for example, we notice that we're getting reports that your AWS account is being flagged by other internet citizens as participating in a DDoS attack, we'll notify you about that, right? It's very important that you read those alerts. If you want more information on setting them up, let me know. But really, it's everything's going to be pushed to your personal health dashboard in your account, and then also your account team's going to reach out to you and say, hey, Trust and Safety is telling us something's going on. Another thing that we'll let you know of is if there is a access key, an AWS access key that is committed to a public repo like GitHub. We do have a best effort service where we'll scan that, and we'll scan the GitHub commits for public repos, and we'll notify you and say, hey, your access key has been found in this public repo, please do something about it. So please pay attention to those. And then finally, direct social contact. So if you have a bug bounty program, which are really cool, or any type of public feedback forums, a lot of times your own customers might tell you like, hey, your website was this and now it has something pretty different on there. So make sure you pay attention to those. CloudTrail. The single most important log source in AWS. I've got it underlined. I've got little arrows pointing to it. If you don't do anything else, please make sure when you go back and you take a look at your cloud environments, make sure that you have CloudTrail turned on. You get your first trail free. So if you have it enabled just within your particular, and it is a regional service, so make sure you have it enabled in all accounts in all regions. If you just have one trail on, it is free. Now, a lot of folks, they will turn on like multiple trails for different reasons. Yeah, there's gonna be a cost incurred with that. But at the basic level, just make sure CloudTrail is turned on. And it's gonna tell you every API action that's performed within an account. So if you're familiar with AWS, the console, it's a GUI, but everything on the back end is still an API call. So CloudTrail is going to tell you who performed the action, when it occurred, where it occurred, what particularly happened, whether if it was accepted or if it was successful or if it failed, and which resources were there. So this is really crucial to have these CloudTrail logs turned on. And then also, as I mentioned before, there are a bunch of different patterns that you can use. If you have a SIM tool of your own, you can, most SIM providers, they have plugins now where you can send your CloudTrail logs directly to the SIM. Or you can put it in like an S3 bucket and have the SIM pull it from there. Another really basic thing that you can do, which I'll share with you, is we have AWS Athena service. So you can turn on CloudTrail and pipe it into an S3 bucket. Athena is our managed, basically like managed database querying service, right? So you can just have it index all of those logs and you can run queries, SQL queries to search for different types of events. It's really cool. It's a very inexpensive way to have that pattern implemented in your environment. And when it comes to actually investigating an incident, it's really crucial. VPC flow logs are another one. Now these do have a cost associated with them, but basically this collects NetFlow-ish type data about any traffic, originating from your account, within your account, or coming into your account or leaving your account. You can enable it at the VPC level, the subnet level, or at the ENI level, the Elastic Network Interface. And it just has basic, interface ID, start, end, source, destination address, port, protocol, packets, and bytes. It's not the same as like a full-on packet capture, but it can at least tell you what addresses are being called, what type of traffic is flowing within your account. It also can help you spot maybe like some application or anomalies, things like that. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is what it looks like if you turn on VPC flow logs and you send them into CloudWatch. Very straightforward stuff. But if you're anything like me, you're thinking, wow, that's a lot, right? Like, okay, you just told me that I need to understand the threats in my environment. I also need to look at CloudTrail logs. I also need to look at VPC flow logs. I'm a security person. I don't have a lot of time. GuardDuty is probably my favorite service. It's a managed threat detection service. One-step activation, and it does continuous monitoring of all of your AWS accounts and resources that it's enabled on. It is a regional service, so you will need to turn it on within specific regions. But basically what it does is it takes data from multiple sources, including your CloudTrail, including VPC flow logs, login events, S3 control plane, data plane events. It even has opt-ins now for ECS or EKS runtime monitoring, EC2 runtime monitoring. We also can monitor RDS, audit logs, which is database, Lambda. It does a whole lot. It feeds that all into its security analytics engine, where it will basically take a look and determine if there is an indicator of compromise, and it will assign a particular alert. And from there, you'll have a bunch of different data and resources about that particular alert so you can take action. Then it integrates with our services like Detective, Security Hub, or even you can pipe it through to EventBridge and our partner services. But again, this is one of those services that on average, GuardDuty will add maybe about 0.5% to 1% to your AWS bill, because you are billed based on the amount of information it consumes. You do get a free 30-day trial, and in that 30-day trial, it'll give you a cost estimation. It'll tell you how much would this cost if I enable it for all my accounts. So if you don't have it enabled, you can just turn it on for 30 days and see what it does. Just turn it on and just start looking at the findings it detects and start taking action on them. If you find value in it, keep it on. If not, there's other services that you could use. But for my money, I would say this is definitely one that is really worth evaluating if you don't have it already. Okay, as I mentioned, GuardDuty also has workload protection for various services. So again, if you have these complex workloads, especially serverless things, you have a lot of containers and S3 buckets and things floating around, you can turn on additional protections for additional costs. We've also added malware protection recently, so we can do, it can detect malware both on your EC2 instances, and then most recently now it can detect any type of malware in your S3 buckets, which is a really big one. That's been a customer ask for a very long time. So if you have a, let's say you have an S3 bucket that you use where you allow end users to upload things from the public internet into that S3 bucket and you collect it, now you can have GuardDuty scan that bucket for you and identify any type of malware. It'll quarantine it for you. It's really cool. This is what a finding in GuardDuty looks like. So at the beginning, you have the purpose of the threat. Then you have the type of resource that's targeted, whether it be an EC2 instance, a Lambda function, as I mentioned. The threat family name, the method in which GuardDuty detected the finding. So if it got it from CloudTrail or VPC fault logs, that'll be in there as well. And then if there's a specific resource that's owned by a tool used in a malicious activity. So in this case, an example of this would be in a an event where they noticed that one of the findings is that a known Bitcoin domain is being requested by an instance within your account, which usually means that there is a server that your instances are querying that is known to be part of command and control infrastructure for known Bitcoin mining operations. This is what that type of finding would look like. All right, so from a scenario-based perspective, again, this is something that unfortunately is very common. Compromised EKS cluster to crypto mining, just to kind of illustrate how quickly this can happen. So you have T0, you have the cluster misconfigured to allow anonymous access. Within 10 minutes, scanners online will start to pick it up. 45 minutes later, there are people who just scan for open Kubernetes clusters. They'll find it. From there, secrets are accessed hours later, if not minutes, and then within the same day, within 10 hours or less, new pods are launched for cryptocurrency mining. Just to kind of really show how quickly that can happen. If you don't have the right protections in place and alerting in place, that can cause a bad situation for you. Okay, this is an example of what these findings would look like within GuardDuty, by the way. I wanted to point this one out. If you are currently using GuardDuty, there's a finding that will pop up from time to time called anomalous behavior. So another thing that GuardDuty does that I have not mentioned is it actually baselines the activity within your environment, and then if it notices that there is a user or a resource that's doing something that it normally doesn't do within like CloudTrail or on the network, it'll flag that. So an example of this is I have an IAM user that only logs in and works with S3. It has permissions to do other things, but user Brandon Rooks, all he does is he manages our S3, or he's a storage tech, right? He's a storage infrastructure. Now all of a sudden I've noticed Brandon Rooks is trying to create privileged IAM users in the environment, right? He has permissions to do it, or he might not. A lot of times, you know, administrators, they are over-provisioned, as I mentioned, least privilege. GuardDuty will flag that and say, hey, look, this user doesn't normally do this type of behavior. You may want to take a look at this. So that's one of those things that could be a false positive. That's why, again, it's really good to really understand your environment, understand your user patterns, and then when you see these types of alerts, you know, take action on them. Okay. Any interest on getting started with GuardDuty? We have some QR codes here. Again, you can try it for 30 days at no cost. If you want to explore the features, dive into the user guide. We also have some really cool free workshops where if you actually want to learn, like in a kind of like a sandbox type environment, how to use GuardDuty and how to identify like specific threats, that's really helpful. How to engage AWS. This is something that is really, really important. If you suspect that you have a security event within your particular account, whether it be you have a GuardDuty finding that is basically indicating that an outside threat actor is accessing a resource within your account, you don't know what to do about it, please open an AWS support case. Highest severity possible. If you are an enterprise customer, this will be critical. If you're a business support customer, I think it's called urgent or high. Provide as much detail as possible, the accounts, services, the ARNs, which are the resource IDs, the timeline of the attack, attach any relevant logs and artifacts, and then if you have access to your AWS account team, please notify them immediately. I'll speak this, as a TAM. I was an account TAM before I became a specialist TAM. I would rather you tell me 10 times you think something's wrong and be wrong than you say, hey, you know what, I don't want to bother Brandon, and then something bad is going on. Well, we could have done something to, really jump in and help you. So we have an amazing AWS customer incident response team, 24/7, 365 global coverage, and they will work with you to understand what's going on in your environment. If it's determined that there is a security incident or event, they'll work with you to recover from it. Okay. How are we doing on time? Are we out of time? Out of time? Okay. Real quick, just wanted to show this to you. I'll post this on my LinkedIn as well. I actually co-authored this. This is a security playbook for compromised AWS account credentials. I wasn't really able to go too deep into this because of time considerations, but if you would like to learn more about the different types of threat indicators that are aligned with compromised users or roles, please take a look at this. We go into a ton of detail, including different types of code configurations, CloudTrail events, etc. We also have a bunch of free workshops that'll let you test this out on your own. And then, does anyone have any questions? Awesome. All right. Thank you all very much.